Welcome into the Thunder Basketball Universe presented by Summer Moon Coffee. And real quick, right off the top, some very exciting news for this podcast. The Oklahoma City Thunder now a proud partner with Summer Moon Coffee, as you'll see here by these lovely coffee cups in our studio.
Yeah, Summer Moon, a great partner and much needed this time of year. Paris, I know that you're a coffee fiend. All these 8:30 tip-offs, I mean, you're probably 3 or 4 cups before we even get to the arena,
Let's
right?
just say this is the perfect partnership here for the Thunder, and I am very, very excited about it personally. So just a very exciting news for us right off the top as we get into our podcast. Really cool stuff from Summer Moon Coffee. We have a lot to get into. Right now, we are recording this. It is May 12th. It is Monday. So we are 4 games into the Western Conference semifinals between the Thunder and the Denver Nuggets. And what a series it has been. Very back and forth. And the Thunder has now tied up this series 2-2. Game 5 coming back to Oklahoma City, tipping off tomorrow.
The Thunder has gotten better as the series has gone on. That doesn't mean necessarily that the results have gotten better each game. Of course, it's gone back and forth in terms of the final result on the scoreboard. But if you look at the way that the Thunder closed out that game in game 4 on the road, tough environment, a slog of a game, to be able to execute the way that it did down the stretch on both ends of the floor, you got to be feeling great about that. And they've leaned on fresh legs and the depth that this team has. Those 2 factors have been critical to get this series back to a point where OKC's got to win 2 out of 3 to close it out, and 2 of those games are at home.
What makes this so interesting is that every game in this series has just taken on a life of its own, whether it was, the big blowout win by the Thunder, a clutch time loss in game 1, or just a wild kind of close overtime battle in Denver, and then this really low scoring kind of slugfest between these 2 teams that we saw yesterday in Denver, which was the first early tip time in this entire series, which is very interesting given the fact that every game up to this point has tipped off at like 8 or 8:30.
Was that just yesterday?
That was yesterday.
Yeah, okay. That feels like 3 or 4 days ago.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a lot of stats that we need to break down from that. I don't know if your stat is from this series or from yesterday's game, but we're going to get into our Summer Moon stat of the week. So Nick, what you got for us?
That rolls off the tongue. I love that we've got this new presenting partner and we've got a chance to hit our stat of the week, but in a more professional way. I like
this.
Okay, my number is 26.
Okay, 26. Shea had 27, so that's not it. He had 27, 6, and 6. So that's the first thing that came into my mind. 26. Give me a hint here. What are we working
Total number of points by the Nuggets.
Bench.
In the first and fourth quarters.
Wow.
Of game 4. And basically my storyline here with this stat is on the road in the playoffs, obviously every possession matters, but how you start and how you finish is absolutely critical. And OKC, the defense held Denver to just 8 points in the first quarter of game 4, held them to just 18 points in the fourth quarter of game 4. So to be able to limit a team that was in the top 3 in the NBA in offensive efficiency in the regular season, that Denver team, to hold them to down that low scoring for the 2 critical portions of the game, the first quarter and the fourth quarter, totally gives yourself a chance to win that game on the road.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, Gallo, because if you look at the first quarter of this last game, game 4, just 8 points for the Denver Nuggets. Now, meanwhile, the Thunder, they didn't really necessarily have their offense going. But when it comes to shot making, there's so many controllables and non-controllables, right? Whether or not the ball actually falls through the hoop, a lot of the times is out of your control. It could be a beautiful, high-quality, wide-open look by a player who is shooting above 40%, and the ball just does not bounce. Yeah. That happens. That's the nature of the game. But for Oklahoma City, I felt like in the first quarter, did a really good job handling the controllables on the defensive end of the floor to limit the Nuggets and their ability to get a rhythm.
Yeah, OKC's rebounding has been excellent here over the last few games of this series. OKC has won the rebounding, 1 points in the paint each of the last 3 games, got the result 2 out of those last 3 times. And that's, they're trying to bottle up the good things that they've done well and carry those over to each game, the fundamental aspects of the game. Those are 2 things that we saw for sure in the first quarter of game 4, which was, holding Denver to 1 shot, a lot of contested 2-pointers or contested threes. and out of rhythm shots, and then making sure that there's gang rebounding going on.
Yeah, the rebounding has been really, really good so far in this series, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but it has been everybody. And we talked to one of those players here today. I want to talk about my stat because it kind of goes into this a little bit for you. My stat is 12.
The number of minutes in a quarter.
That's true. And
how much the Thunder beat the Nuggets by in the fourth quarter of Game 4?
Close. Close. So 12 is how many points the Thunder scored in clutch time against the Denver Nuggets. Well, I'm going to carry this out a little bit further, and I'm going to say 12-0, because that was the score in crunch time against Denver in Game 4. This is significant because crunch time is defined by the final 5 minutes of the game when the game is within 5 points.
Right.
So the Thunder, the Nuggets scored in the final 5 minutes of this game, right? But they didn't allow the game to get below a margin of 5 points within the final 5 minutes. And for Oklahoma City, coming off of a Game 3 where they felt like they left a lot on the table in clutch time in terms of their ability to put the ball through the hoop, manufacture points, I feel like this is the game-to-game growth that Coach Dagnall talks about. The Thunder taking the experiences and the lessons from every experience. This is what we're talking about. Yeah. Every single experience. And I mean from Game 3 to Game 4. I'm not talking about from 2024 to 2025. This is how the Thunder has become a better team now than they were when they started playing the Nuggets in this series.
Yeah, and the Nuggets have all of this wisdom and guile, and you see the way that they are able to be crafty and manufacture some things. And in Games 1 and in Games 3, they were able to just chip away until they could get it to a one-possession game.
Right.
And what the Thunder did, to your point, was they didn't allow it to get to a one-possession
game.
Even though they trailed at the beginning of that fourth quarter, OKC had a really nice burst. I think it was a 12-0 run.
12-0 run.
And they were able to retake the lead. And then from there, they just were able to keep Denver at bay, not allow them to get to even be able to hit that within striking range feel, to not allow for there to be an Aaron Gordon three-pointer that comes in and suddenly ties the game.
And just to put some stats to back this up, like the Thunder, they had 12 points in that clutch time moment. They were 4 of 7 from the field. The Nuggets 0 for 5 from the field and 0 for 3 from the three-point line. And it helped that they also went 0 for 2 from the free throw line in that portion as well. So Oklahoma City doing a great job defensively. Just the Nuggets had opportunities. They weren't great ones, and the Thunder's defense had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, and OKC, has been willing to put different guys in different positions throughout the course of this series. And so you have done, in that fourth quarter, a lot of Aaron Wiggins, a lot of Cason Wallace, a lot of Alex Caruso. Jay Will played a crucial stretch of that fourth quarter to give Isaiah Hartenstein a bit of a breather. And then you could just see which guys had the burst late in that game. And, you finish, I think, with Shea, J-Dub, Alex Caruso, Chet, and Hartenstein there. All of those guys were pretty fresh if you think about it down the stretch of that game. Besides Shea, nobody played more than 33 minutes in that game. And Shea played 38. And you look across and, 4 out of the 5 starters for Denver played 38 or more. And so what you're getting is guys who have a little bit of that extra pop late in that game to be able to make the plays they needed to.
Speaking of Aaron Wiggins, we talked to him today at practice, and I asked him just about the ability to execute in crunch time in Game 4 specifically. And he said, Game 3 was big for us in terms of learning, seeing, understanding what we need to do to get points on the board in those clutch time situations. And there were little things defensively that we needed to, hone in on and tighten up. But offensively, it's just trusting our stuff and making sure that we're tight on that end of the floor. And that showed up big time down the stretch. And Aaron Wiggins in that fourth quarter in particular wasn't necessarily in clutch time where he was really scoring a lot of points, but it was in the fourth quarter. He was part of that group to start the fourth that Coach Dagnall gave a lot of credit to after the game for their ability to start that run, to just get a little bit of momentum in a game where points were just so difficult to come by. For context, the Denver Nuggets scored 87 points in 48 minutes. In Game 2, The Oklahoma City Thunder scored 87 points in 24 minutes.
First half. That's
yeah.
Right. Wow.
So this
I didn't
is
even
just,
clock that yesterday as we were leaving the game, but that's amazing.
It is just a slog of a game. Right now, these are two games on very opposite ends of the spectrum, but it goes to show that just points, very hard to come by.
Yeah, and that's why having different pitches that you can throw, having different players that you can put out on the floor can sometimes, be so massive in these games because inevitably, 1, 2, 3 guys are just not going to be feeling it from behind the arc or not going to have that shooting rhythm. J-Dub didn't have a great, shooting night in terms of those things that he can't control, the ball, rimming in or rimming out. Aaron Wiggins, Cason Wallace, it was their night. I mean, it was their day. Cason, was perfect from behind the 3-point line.
Yep.
He hadn't necessarily been that way previously in the series, but, that afternoon, Mark Daigneault, gives him some extra run because things are looking good. And, because of the way that the Thunder has set this thing up to be interchangeable, to be flexible, to be able to play with different pairings without it being jarring, Mark's been able to just go to whoever, is kind of feeling it and whoever's got good advantages, whoever's looks good and clean on their jump shots and who's in rhythm.
Let's talk more about the depth and particularly the depth in Game 4. You mentioned Cason Wallace, Aaron Wiggins, Alex Caruso. That trifecta right there, a massive source of Thunder offense when they really, really needed it. They outscored in this game, the bench outscored Denver 35-8. And all three of those guys finished in double figures in this game. Very necessary. But specifically, I want to talk about Aaron Wiggins first because we talked to him at practice, so it's a little top of mind. But his rotation has been very different in this series. To start the series, he was like second quarter Wiggs, right? He was coming in at the start of the second quarter, coming in at the start of the fourth. Like it was just kind of, that was how he plugged into the rotation. In this game, Mark brought him off the bench in midway through the first quarter.
Right.
And it was him and I believe Alex Caruso also midway through that first quarter. One of the first guys off the bench for the Thunder. And I asked Aaron today, like, is it weird that, you start with one set rotation and then in Game 4, suddenly you're coming off coming off the bench in the first quarter? He said, it doesn't even faze me at this point. The entire season, his rotation, his minutes have just completely fluctuated. It's been different from night to night, but one thing remains the same. Aaron is the same Aaron Wiggins every single time.
Yeah, trained adaptability. And that's something that Mark has mentioned a number of times is like, Aaron Wiggins was already a very resilient person, but he has turned into an extremely resilient basketball player because of what he's, not just accepted, but embraced about the role that he's been asked to play. You can see there, sort of the forefathers of that is, a guy like Kenrich Williams and Jay Will is like that as well. Those guys have had very similar types of arcs and journeys to this point in their career. And it just, those are the types of guys that if you look back at a playoff run and, those moments like the one in Game 4 where he comes in and he's able to shake that zone defense that Denver's been sitting in and shake that up. Like those are the things that people are going to remember. They're not going to necessarily remember how many points per game Shea averaged over the course of a series. But, I still remember the Daquan Cook game of the Western Conference Finals in 2012. He comes in and he, has 8 points in 6 minutes or something like that. And, these are the types of things that you have to have happen for you over the course of a long playoff run to just, throw little jabs and get the other team off balance a little bit.
And you brought this up at practice today, but he also had 6 rebounds in this game. So it wasn't just his scoring. There were several possessions where the Thunder just needed to secure the board. Because again, the defense was great. The first shot defense, fantastic. Just the Nuggets could not find any semblance of rhythm. They're shooting 31% from the 3-point line. So rebounds to be had. And the Thunder, a great job scrapping up those boards. Aaron Wiggins had a couple of big ones, drew some fouls as well, just getting in there, mixing it up, trying to get those boards. And those are the possessions that matter.
Yeah, and the Thunder has won the rebounding battle here over the last few games, won the points in the paint battle. Chet Holmgren, after Game 1, has 40 rebounds in 3 games.
That's crazy.
That's extremely impressive. And obviously the mentality is there of like, this has got to happen. We've got to secure these boards. Of course, there's been a lot of missed shots, which have led to a lot of rebounds.
There's a lot of opportunity to be had.
Credit OKC's defense for making that happen. But I love that you're sort of pointing out that Aaron Wiggins has a little part to play basically in all of the key factors that led to the victory. You know, the rebounding, to have 6 rebounds in 16 minutes, really impressive for a guy that's about 6'4", 6'5", for him to, you know, be that critical part of that fourth quarter that turned the game. And then the other layer that I'd like to point out is he and Cason Wallace and, you know, J-Dub, those guys in those early fourth quarter minutes, they really manipulated Denver's zone defense. And Denver's really been disciplined. They've really packed that in. They've really, you know, hedged sharply onto J-Dub and Shea anytime they've tried to attack any creases. And OKC's, they've manufactured some looks out of it. But that second unit was really patient, but quick on its feet to take the shots when they were there, to move the defense when they needed to, because Denver's kind of sitting in that 2-3. And when Wiggins got some shots on the wing, when Cason Wallace got some shots in the corner, they knocked him down.
And shot him with confidence. And there's an extra layer to this, because it's one thing to shoot the ball with confidence. It's another thing to shoot the ball with confidence after the entire team has started really, really rough from the 3-point line in this game. I mean, the Thunder started, I believe, at 1 for 11 from the 3-point line, maybe in the first going of this game. And so when the team's not necessarily, the shot's not falling for the team, it's easy to just be like, oof. And this,
Pack it in.
Maybe just like, maybe threes aren't our story tonight, and just like try to find a different look or force something else. But for these guys to step into these shots with confidence, Coach Dagnall called it shot resilience, just to not deviate, just to double down and trust that there's got to be some regression to the mean if you continue to generate quality looks. And that's what Aaron Wiggins was able to do, and that's what Cason Wallace was able to do, and Alex Caruso, who made a couple of key ones down the stretch.
And to your point about the clutch time offense, I asked J-Dub last night about a couple of downhill attacks that the Thunder got late in the game, and I want to dig into those in just a moment. But he said that the reason that OKC was able to get those downhill drives late in the game was because they had good process throughout the game. So they were playing and executing offense the way that they wanted to, regardless of whether the outcome was there. They were executing, they were spacing, they were setting Denver up to not exactly be sure what was coming come clutch time. And so because they had been operating good offense, because they had kind of been stretching and testing Denver's defense all game, there were these 2 prime opportunities that I'd love to dig into that the Thunder had inside the final 3.5 minutes of this game, where on one possession, OKC was able to manipulate the zone defense. And on another, they actually caught Denver in a rare moment of playing man-to-man. And J-Dub on the first one and Shea on the second one were able to get all the way downhill, all the way to the rim for a layup. And against this zone defense, I mean, layups by guards have been almost impossible. And so to be able to manufacture those looks late was so critical, and such, if I'm thinking about it as a fan, I'm really encouraged by the fact that you're able to get those shots at that point in the game.
Well, and the fact to what J-Dub said, the process started early in the game, trying to just get into the teeth of that defense any way possible. And in those possessions, I remember them specifically and being like, wow, that was available at that point in the game. But it was all of the work that the Thunder was doing in the lead up to that to generate those sort of opportunities.
Yeah, and so anytime Shea has the ball out top against this zone defense and a screener comes up, you can basically guarantee that both of those guys at the very top of the key are going to collapse very quickly on Shea.
A little blitz attack,
The fundamental that we saw last night was making early decisions. We've talked about it all season long. Quick decisions, early decisions, decisive. And what Shea did in that situation is basically as soon as the screen came up, maybe even before the screen got there, defenders start to pinch in. That ball is out of Shea's hand and over onto the wing to J-Dub. And Dub, shot out of a cannon, hits that seam, punches the gap, and gets all the way to the rim before that defender that's hanging on the baseline, Aaron Gordon, has time to react. He's over there pulled over, basically hedging. Am I going to stay in the corner and defend a corner 3 here, or am I going to be able to jump in and attack? on a closeout.
Right.
He wasn't able to do either. And J-Dub was able to get all the way to the rim because of how fast OKC went in that scenario.
Those gaps and punching those gaps are just massive keys for Oklahoma City. And big props to Coach Dagnall for how he spread out the floor, right? Because then it forces Denver to make these sort of decisions. The guy in the corner on that 2-3 zone, do I have what's my options here? Because the guy at the top of the key, he's honed in on Shea. He cannot recover here to J-Dub, who's on the wing. And obviously J-Dub's a great player. I got to shade up, and then that might leave a corner 3 open. So it's just all of these dilemmas, all of these pick your poison moments that you're forcing Denver to think about in the most critical point of the game. And any second, any millisecond that you can force somebody to hesitate, think, second guess, doubt their decision is an advantage in your favor.
And it goes to show that, the conventional wisdom is that late in these games, the game slows down. Mm-hmm. And yes, that's true. But that doesn't mean that you have to play slow.
Right.
You can still play fast. The other example was Shea, able to get all the way to the rack. This time, Hartenstein comes up and sets a screen, and Denver's actually in man on this possession. And so he's pulled Jokic all the way up to the level of the screen. But before Hartenstein is even really there, before he's even in position to set a screen on Christian Braun, Shea's already on the gas. He's already out of the whole action. And suddenly, he's got a one-on-one with Jokic at about the three-point line or just above the free throw line. And if you're the Thunder, you're taking that every day of the week. He was able to blow right past him and get all the way to the rim. Christian Braun, who's played great defense all series, is probably sitting there thinking, okay, the Thunder's trying to peel me off of Shea here. They're trying to get a screen on me. But that's the cleverness of OKC, and that's the intentionality and the focus on the fundamentals there early of making the early decision and saying, hey, before the screen even comes, I'm gone.
And just to add on to this point, it can seem like, oh, this is something that the Thunder just like figured out, right? Like late in the quarter when they needed it. No, this is something that Thunder's been doing all season long. Like they've played against zone. This is not the first time they've played against zone. And in those moments, punching the gaps, making early decisions, quick decision making, that's all stuff that I hear from Thunder assistant coaches at halftime of games when you're playing a team that does so much zone. It's like, we got to make those quick decisions. We got to punch the gaps. Those are things that these are the pitches that the Thunder has built up over time so that they can throw them in these sort of critical moments.
Yeah, and so the great thing is that the Thunder did what it needed to do. It got back to, hitting 9 out of 10 on fundamentals compared to maybe a 7 out of 10 a couple days before that in game 3. And the key and the challenge is, can you bump that up closer to 10 out of 10 on the fundamentals for as much of 48 minutes as you possibly can? Because look, Denver's going to be coming in here in game 5 on Tuesday night, and they've got championship pedigree, championship medal. They've, both teams have had a few extra hours of rest compared to, the 40-hour turnaround. This is going to be more like a 54-hour turnaround between games.
This is true.
And so, you think you're going to have to once again be the team that musters up the resolve, the resilience, the mental toughness. And part of that mental toughness is the championship level focus that Alex Caruso talked to us about at practice the day before game 4. He said, look, Denver, they have championship experience. We have to have a championship level of focus. And I think that that's what we saw in game 4. Got to have it every game the rest of this series.
I love what Alex Caruso said in that media availability, because he was like, I'm glad we're playing Denver. They're going to force us to, they bring the greatness out of you. Like you have to be great against them. So I'm glad we're playing them because that's what it forces you to do. Great insight. Like every time we talk to Caruso,
he's
just
on the money.
On the money. Great insight as always. One last player I want to talk about. We've mentioned his name a lot, but Cason Wallace.
Yeah.
We talked about the fact that he was perfect from behind the three-point line. Very timely threes, quick decisions. Knocking down those threes with confidence.
No hesitation.
None at all. None at all. And we had him on the post-game show, on Thunder Playoff Postgame, me and Royce, and we talked to him about just the readiness that him, Wiggins, and Caruso have had. And he's like, look, we know any given night, it could be anyone's night.
Yeah.
And our job is to just come into the game, bring energy, and play confidently. And that's exactly what we did. So that's the offensive side of Cason Wallace's game. Let's not forget the reason he is in the NBA, the reason he has been a part of a 60-win team now for 2 straight seasons is because of his defense.
Yeah.
And that defense showed up big time because his assignment when he checks into the game is to defend Jamal Murray, which is no easy thing to do. But Kaysen did a fantastic job putting in work, not just on the ball with Jamal Murray, because the biggest thing with Jamal Murray is that he's just in screening actions all the time. And Kaysen did his work early. He was working hard, getting over those screens and just making life difficult for Murray throughout the game.
Yeah, and Kaysen just doesn't seem like a second-year player. There are, of course, times where he, gets caught on some of those tricks of the trade that every defender gets caught on with Jamal Murray, like that, time Murray's like coming up through the middle of the lane and suddenly he just stops short right in the middle of the lane and, Kaysen's following behind him and, bumps into him and that's a foul. Those are things that, Murray catches guys on once a game throughout the course of the entire season. But for Kaysen to fight through every screen the way that he did, to get back in front and force, basically any Murray shot, almost all of them, to be a step back jumper, a turnaround fadeaway. Look, he's going to make a handful of those every game. But if you can make him, less efficient on those, last game he's 5 of 15.
Right.
If he's 8 of 15, we're talking about a different game right now.
Exactly.
And so for Kaysen Wallace digging in and forcing every one of those shots to be as contested as possible, those are the margins of the game that the Thunder is having to win against a team that's won a title before, has, a couple future Hall of Famers on the team, and has a couple other guys who are, playing at some of the best basketball of their career.
And he's just been building up this catalog of how to guard certain archetypes of players over the course of these last 2 seasons. And so you to your point, it just feels like he has so much experience and it kind of feels like a veteran mentality when he's going up against these sort of players like Jamal Murray or even, John Morant in the first series. Like his ability to just make sure he stays in front, play smart, fight through these screens, really try to navigate the off-ball stuff, do the work early, stay close to him, like all of that stuff. That is very high-level stuff from a second-year player. And then you marry that with how he's shooting on the other end of the floor, stepping into those shots with confidence. Throughout this series, he's about 50% from the three-point line, so shooting pretty well as well. The two-end effort from Kaysen Wallace has been really top-notch.
And we've talked about the adaptability and the flexibility of this team. And, I don't know about you, but we're sitting right behind the Thunder's bench yesterday. Yeah. I didn't see anyone bat an eye about number of minutes, who finished the game, who finished quarters, who got put into what positions and situations. Like the playoffs are uncomfortable. Yeah. But the Thunder, because of the way that they are with each other, because of the way that they support each other externally and internally, all of this is made a little bit more comfortable because, some nights it's not going to be somebody's game. They're not going to have it from behind the three-point line. Maybe defensively, they're just not, the timing isn't quite where it needs to be. And so for Mark Daigneault to have the luxury of such a deep roster and to be able to push buttons when he needs to push them, to invert things and change things up when he needs to, all of that we saw in Game 4 and it worked. And now the Thunder, if you're Denver, you're kind of looking at them and you're like, what's coming at us in Game 5? Are they going to roll out exactly what they did in Game 4? Or are we going back to some of the stuff that we saw in Game 2 back at home? You don't know, and that type of uncertainty can be really anxiety-inducing.
It can because you're also like, well, who's the sixth man for the Thunder? In Game 1, it was Alex Caruso. Game 2, Jalen Williams off the bench, and then Game 3, you've got a nice little smattering of everybody. You got Kaysen Wallace, Wiggins, and Caruso. So it's just like, who do I look out for? Not to mention Isaiah Joe had a big game as well in this series. So it's just, you don't know. And to Kaysen Wallace's point, everyone knows it could be anyone any given night. And it just makes it very, very difficult to prepare for, scout for, and try to stop. And the Thunder taking full advantage of that so far in this series, which leads us to where we are now. Let's talk about what's brewing for the Thunder here in Oklahoma City. The Thunder has returned now from Denver. Shout out to Summer Moon Coffee. Always brewing up something special. The Thunder now in Oklahoma City for Game 5. As I mentioned at the start of this podcast, every game has just taken on a life of its own. And
taken years off of my life.
Yeah. I don't think I took a deep breath the entirety of that fourth quarter. I was struggling. I was going through it. Finally able to relax post-game. And so what to expect in Game 5? It's interesting. You don't know. You have no idea. And we heard from Coach Daigneault today. He was like, you can't really subscribe much to the idea of momentum in a series, because the fact that, these two teams have traded wins so far in this series really negates the idea that there's any semblance of carryover from game to game.
Yeah, and so you have to do what Shea said after game 2, which is you really have to isolate the emotion that comes with the wins, the losses, the positive, the negative, and you've really got to get grounded. And so and Shea, I mean, he's so thoughtful all the time, but he said, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Not just for us, but in general. Like, I think it's really important that we separate the emotion out of it. We get to 0-0 and we understand what's coming at us the next game, as opposed to trying to ride these highs and lows and get yourself externally motivated. This is a team that's extremely intrinsically motivated.
Yep.
And that's what's allowed them to be a 68-win team in the span of a couple finger snaps.
Yeah.
And it's what's going to allow them to continue to push forward and try to get better as this series goes along.
And they have an opportunity to do that in Game 5, which is going to be on Thursday. That is going to be an 8:30 p.m. Central Time tip-off. So back to the late tip-offs again. I kind of enjoyed that early tip-off game.
Oh, yeah.
Because like we got to get on the flight and we get home and it's 9 o'clock and I'm like, oh, this is lovely.
I was like stunned when I saw that it was still bright and sunshiny outside when we were walking onto the bus to go to the airport.
Wait a minute, this is weird.
Yeah.
But so an 8:30 p.m. Central Time tip-off, that is going to be on Tuesday for Game 5. And then Game 6 back in Denver, that's going to be on Thursday.
Yeah, so great opportunity to come down here to Paycom Center. Doors open 2 hours ahead of time. That first hour between 6:30 and 7:30, concessions are half off. So you're going to want to get in the building, get yourself fed, get something to drink, and then be in your seats for the next hour or so. And you can just get that place rocking and rolling for tip-off.
And those playoff t-shirts, they've been different every single game. So a lot of excitement going into Game 5, what to expect in terms of those playoff t-shirts. A lot to look forward to. This has been such a fun series between these two teams, learning a lot, seeing a lot of different things, so it makes you very interested for what's coming up here.
It's going to be thrilling.
Game 5. It's going to be very thrilling. But until then, thank you so much for watching and listening. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up and catch you later.